Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. and today I'm reviewing Sea of Thieves from Steam Forged Games. Sea of Thieves is a sandbox game for 2 to 4 players based on the video game of the same name, which players are trying to run around the board over here, ultimately trying to gather 25 reputation, which will trigger endgame, at which point they'll add up any other residual things that give them additional reputation before seeing who won the game. That's the core idea, but that doesn't really tell you a lot. You're going to start the game off with 2 ships, 2 itty little bitty ships over here. They're very small ones, the smallest, the easiest ones, nothing particularly crazy about them, but what you're going to be doing with these ships is you're going to be wandering around the board trying to take actions to ultimately improve your reputation. Now, a big part of that will be these voyages you have. You're going to start the game with 3 basic voyages, and then players will have the opportunity to gather new voyages over here from additional hire. We have meager, valuable, and legendary voyages, all of which you'll have to pay for, but they will give you more and better rewards, specifically in reputation, but also in in-game items as you go through them. And so you're trying to gather these because these are going to be one of the driving forces as far as how you build up your reputation. But I say one of the driving forces because there are a lot of ways to build up reputation in this game. There's going to be various monsters and events that come out into play that you're going to have to deal with and interact with. You're going to be going ahead and dealing with crew that are going to give you additional reputation. You're going to have money and endgame currency that's going to give you additional reputation. There's a bunch of things that will give you reputation as you go through the experience, and you're trying to find your pathway forward. You're trying to find your pattern forward throughout all this as you try to take actions with your 2 ships and hopefully upgrade those ships. You see, you ultimately have 3 actions with your ships. 3 actions divided amongst your 2 ships. So you can do 2 actions with one ship and 1 action with another, because you do have to do that. That's just how the game works. You have to do 2 with one ship, 1 with another. But you also have crew actions as well. They'll give you a little bit of a boost as far as what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it. A big part of what's going to guide you, like I said already, are these voyages. You're going to have specific voyages that'll give you a reward in terms of the reputation that you have, possible penalties as well, possible in-game rewards, and some of these over here are going to give you, let's say, specific text. We have treasure hunt. If this ship makes a plunder action in the Lagoon of Whispers hex, we need to find the Lagoon of Whispers as one of these. Here we go, Lagoon of Whispers. Then it can spend successes to place progress tokens on this card, placing a progress token per success spent. If there are 2 or more progress tokens on this card, complete this voyage. So progress tokens or successes is going to be a big thing as you try to take actions on these various tiles. You can go ahead and do plunder actions, which generally involves reaching into this bag, pulling out various tokens, hoping for the best possible loot, but possibly having to deal with skeletons along the way. They're going to be skeletons, which represent the various enemies you have to engage with as you go through this board. And so you're trying to gather these out, but over here, when you go ahead, instead of gathering plunder from the bag, with this card over here, you can go ahead and roll your dice and spend successes. That's 2 successes over there. That's actually a solid roll over here. We have a miss, no successes. We have 2 successes on each of those. That's 4 successes. We can go ahead and put a bunch of successes on this card while still drawing tokens from this bag at the same time. That was a really good roll, honestly. But that's the general idea as far as some of these voyages that you're going to have that drive things forward. And there are all kinds of different things that will give you incentives to explore the world. And you do have this map set up over here that you're going to be trying to figure out how to wander around the board, what locations are going to help you out the most. And also, you're going to have events coming out every round that are going to give you more ways that things are going to be spawning on the board. You're going to have, skeleton fleets. You're going to have your megalodon. You're going to have all the kraken. All these things are going to be coming out throughout the course of the game. Or alternatively, just things that happen as opposed to actual enemies that you have to deal with. Meanwhile, you also have fortune cards. That's going to be your fortune deck over here. By the way, it's worth noting, this handy dandy board over here, I don't have the cards set up the right way as far as where they go. I have them set up for this table set up over here. But you're going to have fortune cards that are going to give you various things you can do, various extra benefits that you have. We have Spyglass. Place this card at any time. Look at the tokens of the hold of another player's ship. We have Conleth's Win. Play the card when one of your ships performs a sail task or makes a full sail action. Move your ship up to 2 additional hexes. Basically, you're going to be wandering around the board, and that will give you an extra benefit or flexibility as far as how you wander around the board when you go ahead and try doing a full sail to move across this ocean. Because you are constantly trying to get from one place to another. Sure, you have 2 ships, but you still have to figure out what voyage is driving you in which direction, and these more expensive voyages over here will give you better rewards, but often require more work to go ahead and deal with them as you go through this. Meanwhile, you can also go ahead and take a port action. You can deal with this whole outpost board over here. If you go back to the outpost over here, you can go ahead and take a port action and start dealing with selling your various resources. In fact, there's a whole little thing you can go through here. You can sell cargo. Any cargo tokens you have, you can go ahead and sell them and claim commissions off them. We can go ahead and do a repair. You can repair your ship from any damages taken, either from various megalodon situations or from the other players. You also have upgrading. If you want to upgrade your ship to the next level, you have to have an undamaged ship, but you can pay to upgrade it so you can get these larger ships over here. You can take a small little guy and bump them up to these larger, more powerful ships and upgrade your stats, your crew, your water level, all those things accordingly on these cards over here. You'll flip them, you'll have other cards. Those will all give you upgrade ship perks. you can go ahead and hire a special crew, which will give you various in-game abilities, end-game reputation, but will cost you money, so you have to be mindful of that. But then you have to find their little token and put it into your ship, because it's an actual physical crew that goes on your ship in the game. And then over here, when you're done with that, you can seek new voyages. That's how you're going to go ahead and pay for new voyages to try to gather them into your hand. You have more options to go back out into the world and seek more reputation. That's the general idea of this game. There's a lot of small aspects we're not fully getting into. I'm not getting into every single crew action. I'm not getting into every single action you take. It's mostly wandering around the board, shooting other players, plundering islands. There's only 5 basic actions to go through. But there's a lot of peripheral stuff I'm not fully getting into. But the general idea is you have 2 ships, you start with those 2 ships, you wander around the board, you can upgrade those ships, you can go ahead and accomplish these voyages, doing whatever it says on the cards to be able to get that increased reputation, to also get the increased currency, because you ultimately do need to build up your own ship, your crew, all the various things in the game, and then you're occasionally going to open fire at other players. Not necessarily as often as you think, because the game doesn't always incentivize you to sit there and attack other players, because very often they have the opportunity to repair their ship before you can do anything. It's only if they can't repair their ship that they'll sink, which means more often than not, it's only really advantageous to sink someone's ship if you're kind of off in the distant ocean on your own. You have 2 buddies over here, and you brought them to the corner island, and you talked about alliances and all these things, and before you know it, you open fire, he's gone, and next thing you know, you're plundering his dead body, but you need to do it distantly from other players, because otherwise, more often than not, other players will have the opportunity to loot things first. Because of the nature of the fact they have an opportunity to repair things in the game, if I go ahead and open fire while this little red guy's over here, if I open fire on you, sure, you might be dead, but then the nature of turn order means that when it comes to you, you don't repair, you die, all the various things you have drop into the ocean, but then it's Red's turn next, and he goes ahead and benefits from that. Effectively, just like in real life, it's not too advantageous to beat up on others when there's 3rd or 4th parties around, because they may take advantage of the situation. You kind of want to be on your own. You want to have that power dynamic off when no one's looking, because that's when you can benefit from it. But the net result of that does mean that that combat's a little less frequent against other players, which is not necessarily a bad thing. There's always the threat of combat, but actual combat is not necessarily all that present. And you're going to do all that until someone has 25 reputation, then you're going to go ahead and finalize the extra reputation that isn't scored in-game, see who won the game, and that is basically Sea of Thieves. Which brings us to a review, starting off with ease of play. The rulebook itself is very front-loaded as far as a whole bunch of things that you have to learn and get into, but once you get past all the side stuff, the actual turn sequencing over here, it starts over here, playing the game. We have page 21 to 27 or so is playing the game. The actual turn sequence and what you do on your turn, all of that is fairly straightforward. There are a lot of concepts or things, so the rulebook, it has a lot of information, it's a lot more to get through, but it's actually a fairly simple game to actually play. There's just a lot of information to actually get to. As far as game length, it's going to definitely depend on the player count. This is the kind of thing, a 2-player game you can knock out in around an hour, but if you're playing, and that once you know it, I should say, if you're playing a full 4-player complement, especially your first time, it might be 2.5 hours, you might be able to get down to a little over an hour and a half once you have 4 players who really know the game. So it definitely depends on experience and player count, but that's what you're looking at roughly for this game. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with what I like, which is the general sandbox feel is done well over here. You are constantly being pulled in different directions, trying to figure out the economy of your actions, trying to figure out what things do you want to pursue in the game. You have these different voyages. Once you accomplish 1 or 2, you'll want to go ahead and go back to port, this outpost action over here, trying to figure out the best way to to do everything. If you have 1,400 gold, you go ahead and upgrade to the next ship, which costs 1,200. That's going to limit your ability to buy new voyages, or maybe the voyages are better. Maybe just driving yourself forward with your current ships are the better way to go, and you're constantly being torn in these different directions as far as what to do, how to proceed after those things. You might be off on an island trying to accomplish your own quest over here. Meanwhile, the skeleton fort comes out, and this thing just begs people's attention as it draws people towards the skeleton fort in an ever-increasing battle across these skeletons present, because you'll get a lot of reputation if you do so. And so you are constantly being torn by the various things happening on the board around you, and it does have that sandbox feel that you could do anything, and you're just trying to chase that reputation to game end, but while also chasing how to upgrade yourself as you go. So your turns are fun because you constantly know what you're going for, so as soon as your turn's done, you're just waiting for it to come back to you because you already know the next things that you're trying to do because you want to have fun. You want to continue plundering that island because that way you'll finish this voyage. You want to head back to port and deal with the outpost because you might be the first player who upgrades to a brigantine. A brigantine. It's a sloop, a brigantine, and galleon. You'll be the first player to upgrade to a galleon. I can say that better than brigantine. I don't know why that word bothers me. Brigantine. Brigantine. It's not a ship I know. you have a sloop, the middle ship, and a galleon. But you always have all these things, and they're all driving you forward. You have more crew you want to pursue. You have ships, encounters, legend cards, mission cards. These legend cards, these fortune cards over here, not legend cards. These fortune cards over here, these are a lot of fun. They range very heavily as far as the things they let you do, but they give you a lot of flexibility to get yourself out of a bad situation in the game. And so there's a lot of things giving you flexibility. Even the crew actions, you have this concept. It's a little confusing at first to get into, but the concept of you have crew actions and then you have your ship actions. So your ship actions, you have 3 divided amongst your 2 ship, but your crew actions, you have the number of crew you have based on your ship size over here, and you can use those to take crew actions, which are smaller things, but one of those things is being able to move a single spot, which can very often set you up beautifully to go full sail towards where you need to go, or even just close that distance. And so those crew actions give you a lot of flexibility, healing other crew, going across the island, lots of things you can do, although just as often they will be wasted. Depending on what you're doing, the crew actions sometimes feel a bit like a waste because sometimes there's just nothing you can do with them that's beneficial, and then it's like you kind of wish there was something you could do that's beneficial, and you kind of feel punished for already being where you need to be and doing all the things you need to do. That's a separate conversation, but there's a lot of flexibility going on in the game, and I also like the fact that there's not a lot of incentive to sit there and attack others all the time. There are opportune moments where it's worth that strike. There are times you'll have fortune cards that let you take a look at somebody else's hull and see what they have in their hold. You also have cards that let you board other players and just steal the stuff they have. So there's definitely interaction in the game, but the interaction rarely, at least for me, at least for our groups, rarely has that interaction resulted in players feeling completely beaten up in this game. Although, if you have a lot of loot in your hold, players tend to be just nervous enough to need to account and accommodate around that. Nobody wants to sit there and say, you know what, I know you're not really going to attack me, but if my hold gets too tempting, you might either try to just pillage it in some way, shape, or form, or you might straight up go for the kill because I'm winning currently and I want to keep all that loot for myself. As far as things I don't like in the game, first of all, this is a small nitpick, but the production of this doesn't really do it for me as much. Part of that is biased by the fact that I typically play Steamforged games that are their crowdfunding games, that have a lot of miniatures, a lot of luxifications. They feel like more premium experiences because they cost like premium experiences. Sea of Thieves is a retail game from them. It's very much a retail game, very much a retail production, and I think part of my judgment of the game is biased by what I'm typically used to seeing from Steamforged, and kind of wishing we had a giant epic pirate game with gorgeous miniatures and table presence and all these things. As it is, it's fine. The art as well, the video game assets, all of that, it's fine. I don't mind it, but it doesn't necessarily do it for me. The tokens often feel a bit on the small side. I think that this is very much a standard retail game. It doesn't feel cheap by any means. I think there are small things that maybe could have been better, but ultimately it's fine. It is fine. I think I'm used to seeing more from Steamforged, and that colors my perception of it, which again, price point is retail, so that all makes sense. I'll also say that I don't care about your turn in the game. Now, this is a common problem for me and sandbox games. I love what sandbox games let me do. I hate the fact that I have to sit through multiple people's turns to get back to the part where I care about, and that has been a problem for me in a lot of sandbox games, and it is just as much of a problem for me in Sea of Thieves. This game does not do anything to fix that problem for me. My options are I play it as a 2-player account, which I actually like it as a 2-player game, but you play it as a 2-player game, and you have less, players or ships on the board, and you also do have more of an incentive to pillage another player. The reality is a 2-player game. I like the fact that at a 3-player game or a 4-player game, I am rarely going to have to mentally think about players just trying to tank my ship. At a 2-player game, that changes drastically, because if I destroy your ship and you get to your turn and you don't repair all the stuff that's happened, well then when you sink, I am now the next player in turn order and I benefit from attacking you. So 2-player games tend to be a lot more cutthroat and a lot shorter. I like the shorter part. The cutthroat part takes a little bit away from the sandbox feel, so no matter what player count I play of Sea of Thieves, I'm facing some degree of something I don't like. At a 2-player game, it feels more cutthroat and competitive, which just isn't the experience I want from it. Well, the competitive I do. The cutthroat, destroying my ships all the time, less so. At a 3 or 4-player game, I don't have that as much of an issue, but I do have more increased downtime, and I just don't care about your turn. I have played this game multiple times now, and every single time I'm playing, I usually get to a point where I'm like, I know my next 4 turns, I know what I'm doing, I have my voyages lined up, I know what I'm doing, I'm going to be going here, I'm going to be gathering stuff from there, I'm going to be dealing with the skeleton fort here, and then I hope to go back to the port. Okay, I need about, 15 actions, my next 5 turns are kind of mentally slotted out. Sure, I'll pivot, I'll adjust, I'll deal with what's happening, but I mostly don't care about the fact that you're taking a while to think about the next things you want to do, and I have to resist the inevitable urge to pick up my phone because I just don't care about your turn. And again, this isn't necessarily a Sea of Thieves problem inherently. To me, it's a sandbox game problem that some sandbox games are either good enough or have in some way helped me with that, and Sea of Thieves is just another one of those games that has that particular problem. As far as things I can see others not liking, some of the counters can be a bit fiddly or annoying to deal with. You're gonna have to deal with a whole bunch of cards of different things that are popping out. You know, the skeleton fort is this weird situation of like, I like the skeleton fort. I happen to enjoy the fact that it kind of creates a central hub for players to gather around and push each other out and deal with things. But it's also this weird kind of whack-a-mole. Like, you know, 2 skeletons, kill them, pop up 2 new ones, kill them, pop up 2 new ones. There are various things in the game that are a little fiddly or a little annoying to deal with as you go through it. Nothing crazy over there. There's tons of dice rolling and drawing missions and drawing encounters and the luck of where things pop up. I've had games where my starting two voyages over here are literally right next to where my ships are, and so I barely have to move there. Meanwhile, someone else could have voyages that are across the map, and so there is definitely a degree of luck, both between the rolling of the dice, the way that's going to play out, but plus the additional element of where the voyages are, or even what fortune cards you get in this game. I do not think in this game that all fortune cards are created equal. I don't think it's a case of, hey, they're all great, it's just, you know, some are great in this situation, some are great in that situation. I don't think that. I think the fortune cards are some great ones, some good ones, and some occasionally infrequently good ones. I think they are all over the place, and that means there's multiple facets of different degrees of luck that can experience in the game, from the missions, from the dice, from the fortune cards, from who knows what that goes on in the game, which may bother you more if you're looking for a slightly more deterministic or more reliably yours experience, if that makes sense. I'll also say that the crew actions versus the full actions of the game is a slightly confusing concept that generally takes a few turns for players to gather the difference and the distinction between the fact that your ship has actions, but your ship also has crew actions because the crew are able to do things on the ships. So your ship has actions equal to the crew, but your ships also have actions equal to the 3 actions, but only 2 for one ship, 1 for another. It really works very easily once you get into it, but it's a little confusing at first. As far as final thoughts on Sea of Thieves, Voyage of Legends is the full name. Sea of Thieves, Voyage of Legends. I enjoy this. I've had fun playing Sea of Thieves, but ultimately for me, it is still stuck in that sandbox problem, which again, the tricky part is the 2-player game. I actually really like the 2-player experience as far as the lower downtime, but it does result in players being much more willing, or not necessarily willing, willing's not the wrong word, because if you're not willing to attack each other, you're doing yourself a disservice. It benefits you to attack somebody in a 2-player game. You want to be on your toes in there. So for me, this is a sandbox game that does a lot of things well, that is a lot of fun. I don't know if necessarily particularly shines as being an amazing sandbox game in reasons X, Y, and Z. There are a bunch of sandbox games out there that do this kind of principle. Western Legends, Xayah, Legend of a Drift System, lots of others that I'm not immediately thinking of. There's often a degree of pick up and deliver to some of these experiences that's a little bit present here. I like the fact that there's not that much pick up and deliver in here because I don't love that as a mechanic. But for me, Sea of Thieves ultimately is a good sandbox game that I've had a lot of fun playing with, that does suffer from the same regular problem that I have with a lot of sandbox games where I love my turn, but I really totally don't care about yours. And so for me, it's a 3.5 out of 5. I enjoy it, I like it, but it's still a sandbox game for better and for worse. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, Xayah Legend of a Drift System is going to be the first one I give, because that one for me is... Xayah Legend of a Drift System, for me, it still suffers from the core problem, but the rest of the game is so amazing, so delightful as far as what it does and how it does it, that I can forgive it that cardinal sin, that I will deal with putting up with your turns because the overall system is arguably the best sandbox experience that I have played, period. And then secondly, I'll say Forsaken. Forsaken has done what, again, a lot of sandbox games have this problem, and this it is what it is. For me, the element of Forsaken that where it works, where other sandbox games haven't, is the 2-player version of Forsaken. The 2-player game of Forsaken does deliver a very solid, very enjoyable experience, which means I can actually have a sandbox game where I only have to deal with one person's downtime instead of 2, 3, or 4 people's downtime in the game. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this video helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.